Hey everyone, Dr. Adam here. Today's video is going to be on how to render wax at a small scale. So we just got through finishing with extraction today. I've got a whole bucket of wax cappings and there's a lot of honey left in this. And so the first process, first step to the process of rendering wax is actually to capture that honey that's in that wax that we just uncapped off of our frames. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to do that. Now, where this goes, what we're doing with this, essentially what we're going to be using is that same strainer, that stainless steel strainer that I showed you in the extraction video. We're going to be using that to separate our cappings from our honey. And let me show you how we do that. So you'll notice that with the strainer that I'm using, I'm only using the bottom part of the strainer. The other piece, the top part, is taken out for this particular process. So if you have a couple of these, it's really nice to set these up because you obviously can't fit a ton of wax in this particular strainer. So if you're doing this at a larger scale, you're going to use something different. But at this scale, this works really good. So all you're going to do is you're going to basically take these wax cappings in this in your uncapping bucket. You're going to take them out and just set them in here. And over the course of the next couple days, your wax, or the honey, is going to start coming out of that wax. See, there's quite a lot of honey in that. And so we'll strain this out. Now, typically, just for your own personal knowledge, typically we do not sell this honey. This is our personal honey that we use, that this comes from. It's just something we generally do. The stuff that we process through our regular extraction process is what we sell to our customers, but this typically is what we use for ourselves and family, and there's nothing wrong with this. I would normally just do another filter process after this, because a lot of times as you're transferring this into this sieve, into the stainless sieve, you end up getting some wax particles in the bucket that it's going to be emptying out in the honey. And so you just want to make sure that you're accounting for that, because you will get bits and pieces in there. So I'm just going to load this up. You can see as we get closer to the bottom of this bucket, there's a ton of honey in here. Normally off of I'd say about 3 to 4 gallons of wax, I'll usually recover about a gallon of honey. So this is something you want to do. You do not want to just wash this out. And what we'll show you in the next step of this is the actual washing process once this is all once this is all strained out. Get all that good honey off my hands here. All right, and we'll go ahead and show you what this looks like after it's sat here for a couple days with a lid on it, just like this. So it's been about 3 days now that we've let this wax sit in the strainer to strain out that excess honey. And you can see that in these 2 buckets, we've got honey both in the bottoms of both of these buckets. And collectively, we've got about 1.5 gallons of honey that we recovered from these wax cappings. So, a substantial amount of honey that's left behind in these wax cappings. Now, at this point, these cappings are relatively lightweight. They're still sticky. They've got some honey in them, but they're much more light in weight than they were previously because they lost all that honey. So the next step of this process is going to be to wash this wax and get all of that excess honey out of the wax itself and get ready for rendering. So the next part of this process is washing the wax. And you can see I've got my bucket of wax here. I filled it with cold water. You only want to use cold water in this process because if you use hot water, the wax is going to start melting and it's going to become real malleable and just become a mess. You want it to be brittle so that it cleans up real nicely. So what you're going to do is basically just take your hands and you're going to start working this wax. And what we're doing is we're trying to break up all of these particles here so that all of the honey can be accessed and dissolved in the water. This is going to take normally it takes about 4 to 5 washings to get this to run clear, but you're basically going to do this until the water runs clear, meaning that it doesn't look like it has honey in it anymore. And once all of these cappings are broken up into nice small pieces, it will end up just breaking up and flaking out into very light pieces. You can see that it's already doing that. So this is the process that we do to ensure that we basically have clean wax as we're coming in to melt it down, that it's not full of honey. Okay, so we've got pretty much our first washing done at this point. You can see most of this is broken up pretty finely at this point. So now we're ready to go ahead and rinse this out. So we're going to dump the water out. We're going to keep the wax in, and we're going to refill it with water. This is our second round of washing. You can see how different the wax already looks. At this point, I'm just going to keep macerating it with my hands, mixing it around. Again, we're just trying to get those big clumps like that of wax broken up so that that honey can release. Now, if we don't wash the wax, the risk of this is that if you do not process this all in one day, and normally we let our caps dry after we do this washing process, but if you let your caps dry after this washing process and they are not clean, the cappings are not clean of honey, you will get mold that will accumulate on your wax and it'll foul up your wax. So you don't want that to happen. And so what we're doing here really is part of the process of allowing these wax cappings to be stored without processing any further. So, sometimes you're just too busy. For us, a lot of times we have just way too much wax to get through. So, normally we'll have maybe 10 or 15 gallons of wax that we're processing in one session. And it's just too much to do all of this in one day. So after we end up cleaning out all this wax, we end up putting it out and letting it dry. And I'll show you what that looks like as soon as we're done washing through this. Being that this is the second round, the water is cleaning up. The wax cappings are breaking down as far as coming apart from these big particles. And so let's go ahead and we're going to give it another rinse now. Here we are at rinse number 3. We're just going to go ahead and agitate this. At this point in time, most of this wax is really broken down. You can see it's in a very kind of fine material, or fine compared to what it was. We'll go ahead and mix that around. The water is starting to wash pretty clean. After that first and second round, we'll probably have a pretty clean batch coming here. I can already see the color of it's changed quite a lot in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and rinse this out one more time, and we'll likely have our fourth round here, and that's probably going to be enough to get this relatively, or this cleaned out from all the honey that was in there. All right, let's strain it one more time. All right, our fourth round. You can see everything looks very, very smooth at this point. I'll show you after we rinse this after we strain this last bit out, what this volume changed to. Remember when we started, we had we had wax cappings up to about the 4-gallon mark on this 5-gallon bucket. And you'll see that volume has changed quite a lot because of this process and breaking this stuff all up into smaller pieces. So what we're going to do at this point is I'm going to do my final strain here. And what I'm doing in the straining process, I know I'm not showing you guys this because, well, I've got my camera set up in here, we've got all the lighting set up in here, and really what this process, all it is basically what I do is I take a 5-gallon bucket lid. You can see this is a brewer's bucket. It doesn't matter, or a brewer's bucket lid. It doesn't matter what type of lid you use. But you basically are going to just leave a small opening at the bottom and then tilt the entire bucket. The wax particles, you'll lose a little bit of wax particles, but they'll bind up in this area, and essentially you'll just get water flowing out. So that's what I'm doing as far as getting this water out and keeping the wax in. Super simple process. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and strain this out, and then I'm going to show you what the volume of this now looks like and what the cappings themselves look like once we're done with the rinsing process. Okay, so we're done with our rinsing process, and what you can see is that the volume has changed tremendously in this bucket. We're essentially only got about 2 gallons of wax cappings in here. You can see that at this point they're very light and kind of flaky, and that's exactly what you're looking for, is this flaky texture, so that you know that basically all of that wax has been broken up and most of that honey has come out at this point. The next stage to this process is going to be to dry these cappings. And after we do that, we can start the processing part of it, or if you wanted, you can store your cappings after the drying process in a brown paper bag. If you just don't have the time to do the rest of the process at this point. So you can store these cappings once they're in this washed state and dried out. Let's show you the drying rack that we use to do this. Okay, so now we are going to dry our cappings. And what I have here is something that I made. This is an old underbar ice storage thing that we got from a bar that was going out of business. So nice stainless steel container. And essentially what I built was this frame up here. This is out of a stainless steel piece of equipment that we have, a cutting board. I took one of the trays out of there and then I put stainless steel window screen on top of that. And so what we do with the cappings in order to facilitate this drying process is we basically just dump them into here. Leave that stray stuff in there. Most of our cappings in there. And then what I do is I'm just going to spread this out with my hand, like so. And the water will drip down into the ice bin, which has a drain at the bottom of it. And so that'll all come out. What we'll do is we'll put a fan on this, and this will all dry within a day. So we'll go ahead and start this process. It'll take a few hours to get this dry, and then we'll show you the next stage of this process, which is actually melting down the wax and starting the rendering process.
Hey everyone, Lacey here. We are now in the kitchen for wax processing. We use very simple equipment for small processing. First, we have aluminum pitchers. I use 2 of them, one for the initial wax and then to pour it into. We'll show you the whole process. And also a canning pot. And I try to get the heat up to the lowest temperature possible. It ranges right about 160, melting pot 145 or melting point 145 for beeswax. So we'll lay this on top to reach that point. The second canister is covered with a rubber band and a fine mesh cheesecloth. I've used very fine mesh. I've used fine mesh. It is up to you. And we'll see, depending on the strain, depending on how clean we want it, I'll either double it up or use it as a single layer. So I'm just filling the pitcher with beeswax. This process is long. Beeswax takes a while to melt. So I'm going to fill this all the way, almost all the way to the top. And it's just going to take some time to melt down. I will stir it with a silicone spatula as it melts down. So the wax is in. I'm going to test the water, because wax melts at 145. I do want my water to be a bit warmer than that because we're in a double boiler type of situation. We don't want wax to get above 170, however. That's that point to where it starts to lose its great properties. And we'll start to see that process of melting begin to happen shortly. So the wax is all melted. I'm going to go ahead and pour it off into the cheesecloth. I'm wearing gloves because it's hot and the gloves help mitigate that. I typically will create a little bowl with the cheesecloth and just work my way all the way around it, kind of taking it in circles. I will come back through and bring a spatula to it. If it starts to fill up, just wait a second, let it strain. This process doesn't take too long. There are times when I'll have to change out the cheesecloth. I'll show you how I do that in just a moment, as easy as possible to mitigate some of the mess. And if I have more than this amount of beeswax, I'll replace the cheesecloth as I go. When you're done with this ball of cheesecloth and stuff and extra wax, you can ball these up and use them as fire starters. So if you have a bonfire, throw them in. Getting ready to cook on the fire, throw them in, and you can light the cheesecloth, and it will be a good use of a fire starter. So while beeswax takes a long time to melt, it is fairly quick to harden. And that's one of the reasons I keep it in the ounce blocks. And your end product will continue to dry as you lay them out, and you have processed beeswax.